The morning sun cast a warm glow through the sheer curtains of the bridal suite at Rosewood Manor. Emma Harper sat quietly, her hands trembling just slightly as she smoothed the delicate lace of her wedding dress. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, the day she would marry Daniel Reed, the man she had loved since college. The soft scent of peonies and fresh lavender filled the room, but beneath the calm exterior, a faint ripple of unease disturbed her peace. Downstairs, the grand hall buzzed with life. Caterers arranged pristine white tablecloths while guests began to arrive, their low murmur of conversation mingling with the soft notes of a string quartet playing in the courtyard. Daniel, her groom, stood confidently at the altar, greeting each friend and family member with a radiant smile. At his side was Jack Collins, Daniel's best man and longtime friend, whose presence comforted Daniel but unsettled Emma in ways she couldn't yet understand. Emma recalled the way Jack's eyes had lingered on her during the rehearsal dinner 2 nights ago, a momentary glance charged with something unspoken. She quickly dismissed the thought. Jack was family, Daniel's oldest friend, practically part of her extended family. Nothing more. The clock inched forward toward the ceremony. Emma's mother, Claire, entered the room, her expression kind but taut. "Emma, darling," she said softly, "everyone's waiting downstairs. It's time." Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself before standing. Her reflection in the mirror caught her eye, a bride radiant in white, nervous but hopeful. Today was the beginning of a new life. Downstairs, Daniel adjusted his cufflinks, exchanging a brief look with Jack. There was a flicker of something in Jack's eyes, a mix of tension and something darker that Daniel masked with a polite smile. The organ's soft notes signaled the start of the ceremony. Emma's heart pounded as she stepped onto the aisle, eyes fixed on Daniel. Faces blurred into a sea of smiles and tears as she walked closer. For a moment, everything felt perfect, just as it should. But beneath the surface, a secret simmered. The best man's affair with the bride was a secret dark enough to shatter the flawless facade of this perfect day. And as the sun set, the line between love and betrayal would blur, leading to consequences no one could imagine. The reception hall at Rosewood Manor was transformed beyond recognition. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting dancing light onto polished oak floors where guests swirled in elegant dresses and tailored suits. Ivory drapes framed towering windows that looked out on the sprawling gardens, still bathed in the golden glow of early evening. Soft jazz filled the air, mingling with the low hum of laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional shout of joyful congratulation. Emma floated through the crowd on a tide of well wishes, her smile genuine, but a flicker of distraction clouding her eyes. Everything around her was perfect: the flowers, the music, the carefully curated menu. The warmth of family and friends gathered to celebrate. But beneath the surface of the laughter and champagne bubbles, tension twisted like an unseen blade. Jack Collins, the best man, was everywhere. He toasted with Daniel's groomsmen, danced briefly with some of the cousins, and nodded politely to Emma whenever their paths crossed. But those brief exchanges left Emma disoriented, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with joy. There was an intensity behind Jack's eyes, a weight in his half-smile that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Daniel seemed oblivious, or perhaps deliberately blind, to the unspoken undercurrent that linked Emma and Jack in ways that no one else suspected. Emma's mother, Claire, pulled her aside near the dessert table, her voice low but firm. "Emma, don't let the nerves get to you. It's a beautiful night." Emma nodded, grateful for the distraction, but the knot in her stomach tightened. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the way Jack glanced at her when he thought no one was looking, in a way Daniel's gaze occasionally flicked toward Jack during a conversation, as if sensing something but unwilling to confront it. The photographs around the room, captured moments from their years together, told a story of happiness and trust. But Emma knew secrets simmered beneath the surface, invisible to everyone but her. A secret Jack had whispered late one night months ago, his voice hushed and urgent, promising everything and threatening nothing at once. As the evening wore on, the crowd thinned. The close friends gathered near the grand fireplace, talking in quieter tones. Daniel pulled Emma close, his hand warm against hers, trying to reassure her. "This is our night," he whispered. "Nothing can ruin it." But Emma's gaze drifted toward Jack, who stood alone by the bar, a glass of scotch in hand. His eyes met hers once more, and in that glance, she saw the truth she'd tried to bury, the truth that fueled the fire burning inside her. Later, when the music slowed and couples took to the dance floor, Daniel asked Emma for the first dance. They moved together, his hands steady on her waist, their eyes locked in unspoken promises. But Emma's mind was elsewhere, caught in a storm of guilt and desire she couldn't escape. Jack's laughter echoed softly behind her, a sharp contrast to the sweetness of the waltz. The night was perfect on the surface, but Emma knew that beneath the celebration lurked a storm that threatened to spill over. As the clock neared midnight, the weight of hidden tensions pressed heavier. No one saw the cracks widening. Not yet. But when the night ended, lives would be changed forever. The early morning light filtered through half-closed blinds in Jack Collins's modest apartment, casting long shadows across the cluttered room. Empty coffee cups, a stack of unread newspapers, and a few scattered wedding invitations lay abandoned on the small table. Jack sat on the edge of a worn leather armchair, his gaze distant, fingers tapping nervously against the armrest. Last night's celebration seemed like a distant memory, blurred by the swirling storm inside his mind. The wedding had been flawless on the surface. Laughter, music, champagne, and smiles that masked the underlying tension. But beneath the guise of joy, Jack harbored a secret, one that threatened everything he held dear. For months, Jack had fought a battle between loyalty and desire, between friendship and forbidden passion. His affair with Emma, the bride, had begun as a reckless escape, a momentary lapse during a vulnerable time, but it spiraled into something far more complicated, far more dangerous. Jack's phone vibrated sharply against the table, pulling him from his thoughts. The name on the screen was familiar but unwelcome. Daniel Reed. Jack hesitated. Should he answer? What could he say? The charade was growing harder to maintain with every passing day. Finally, he slid the phone open and pressed it to his ear. Jack. Daniel's voice was steady, but carried an undercurrent of suspicion. Can we talk? I need to clear some things up. Jack swallowed hard. Sure. When? Tonight. After work. Just you and me. The conversation ended abruptly, leaving Jack alone with the echoes of his own guilt and fear. He knew what the talk would be about. The subtle changes Daniel had noticed, the cold moments, the prickling intuition that something was off. Jack ran a hand through his hair, the weight of his double life crushing. How long could he keep this up? How long before everything shattered? Meanwhile, Emma was also grappling with her own turmoil. While she smiled and celebrated with friends and family, the secret she shared with Jack was an open wound beneath her skin. The guilt gnawed at her relentlessly, especially when she looked into Daniel's trusting eyes. She loved Daniel, but the passion and forbidden connection with Jack had woven itself into the fabric of her heart. Back at the hotel where Daniel worked as a corporate consultant, his day was filled with meetings and client calls, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the subtle moments over the past weeks. The way Emma's smile sometimes faltered, the fond glances exchanged between Jack and Emma that didn't quite reach him, the sudden coldness that crept into their conversations. He had hoped it was paranoia. A best man's presence was supposed to be a comfort, a trusted friend standing by his side. But doubts had taken root, growing stronger by the day. That night, as dusk settled over the city, Daniel and Jack met in a quiet corner of a downtown bistro. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Daniel's voice was calm, but firm. Jack, I know something's going on. You can't hide it from me forever. Jack's heart pounded wildly. Daniel, I don't know what you mean. Daniel leaned forward, eyes sharp. I saw the way you look at Emma. And she's changed. Don't lie to me. Jack swallowed, the truth burning behind his eyes. It's complicated. Daniel's expression hardened. It's more than complicated. It's betrayal. The word hung between them, heavy and suffocating. The friendship that had lasted since childhood teetered on the edge of ruin. Jack struggled to find words. There was no easy way to confess, no way to undo what had happened. And yet, the secret pressed on him like a weight unbearable to bear any longer. The days that followed the tense confrontation between Daniel and Jack were heavy with unspoken words and unsettled nerves. The wedding, which had once seemed the perfect culmination of love and friendship, now felt like a fragile veil stretched thin over a growing storm. Daniel went about his routine with a pale determination. At work, he sat silently through meetings, his focus scattered as his mind replayed the conversation with Jack again and again. The casual glances he had noticed between Emma and Jack suddenly took on a new, sinister meaning. Daniel's heart clenched every time he saw Emma laugh a little too brightly at one of Jack's jokes or catch his eye across a crowded room. The trust that had defined their relationship now felt fragile, brittle, and easily shattered. Back at Rosewood Manor, the atmosphere among the close-knit group of friends and family was taut with tension. Even the summer sun, which poured generously through the tall windows, seemed unable to warm the chill in the air. The reception had ended days ago, but the guests remained, indulging in long dinners, whispered conversations, and glances heavy with suspicion. Emma moved through the crowd, smiling politely, but with a growing exhaustion she couldn't hide. The secret she shared with Jack was a weight pressing down on her, a silent scream she could not voice. She found herself drifting toward the garden, seeking refuge among the blooming roses and quiet shadows. Her mother, Claire, found her there, a cool breeze rustling the leaves overhead. Claire's eyes, usually soft with affection, now held a steely concern. "Emma, we need to talk," Claire said quietly. "This can't go on." The look on Daniel's face, I've never seen him like this. Something has to give. Emma swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "I don't know what you want me to do, Mom. It's not that simple." Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice even further. "You're risking everything. Your marriage, your friendships, even your own happiness. Secrets like this don't stay buried." Emma glanced down at the white petals scattered across the garden path, her mind racing. She knew Claire was right, but the passion and temptation that had drawn her to Jack were tangled deep into her heart, roots that refused to let go. While Emma wrestled with her guilt and desire, Jack's world was unraveling in its own way. The confident, charming man who had stood so proudly by Daniel's side was now a man haunted by his choices. His casual interactions were tinged with nervousness. His laughter, once easy and genuine, now forced and brittle. He met Emma in secret, stolen moments in shadowed corners, hushed conversations behind doors they hoped no one else would open. Each time, the same mixture of longing and dread swirled between them. Jack wanted to believe they could find a way out, that somehow love could conquer the chaos they had created. But reality crept relentlessly closer. Friends began noticing the subtle cracks. Emma's occasional distant expression, Jack's restless pacing, the awkward silences when Daniel was near. Whispers started to circulate, faint and cautious but growing louder with each passing hour. One evening, during a late-night gathering around the fire pit in the sprawling garden, the veneer of civility shattered. The guests were gathered beneath the stars, their faces illuminated by flickering flames. Glasses clinked softly, and the murmur of conversations filled the air. Suddenly, a careless remark from a distant cousin pierced the fragile peace. "He's been acting strange lately, hasn't he? Emma and Jack, I mean." The words hung in the air like a spark dropped on a dry grass. Murmurs spread, eyes darted, whispers quickened. Emma's breath caught, her hand tightening around her wine glass. Daniel's brother, Mark, his jaw clenched, stepped forward. "We all know something's off. This isn't just the usual wedding stress." A hush fell over the crowd. Emma's cheeks flushed, a mix of shame and anger. She caught Jack's gaze, heavy with fear and defiance. But before either of them could speak, another voice broke through. Secrets don't stay hidden forever, said a woman from across the circle, her tone sharp. It's better to face the truth now than live in lies. The tension escalated quickly. Friendly banter dissolved into pointed accusations. Some guests tried to intervene, but the damage was done. What had been a celebration of love was turning into a battlefield of suspicion and betrayal. Amid the chaos, Emma received a chilling message on her phone. The screen lit up with words that made her blood run cold. You can't hide forever. The truth will come out. Her hands trembled as she read and reread the message. Who could it be? Who else knew? Panic rose in her chest alongside a fierce determination. She realized the fragile web of secrets was unraveling faster than she had imagined. That night, Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling, the shadows lengthening across her room like dark fingers of doubt. She knew that the facade was crumbling, that soon everything would come crashing down. Daniel, too, was struggling to keep his world together. At work, he barely spoke, his colleagues noting the change in his demeanor. When he was home, he lingered in silence, his eyes searching for answers in rooms filled with people, but empty of sincerity. The man who had once been confident and trusting was now a ghost of himself, haunted by the possibility of betrayal and loss. The foundation of his life, the woman he loved and the friend he trusted, was shaking beneath his feet. As the weekend drew to a close, the guests departed one by one, leaving behind a house heavy with unresolved tension. Emma and Jack found themselves alone in the vast, quiet space of Rosewood Manor, the silence around them pregnant with unspoken fears. They stood facing each other, the last embers of their secret burning bright but dangerous. "We can't keep doing this," Emma whispered, tears brimming. Jack nodded, his voice barely audible. "I know, but I don't know how to stop." The shadows had deepened, and with them, the inevitable reckoning loomed. Beneath the surface of smiles and celebrations, a storm was gathering, ready to break at any moment. The days following the whispered accusations and the chilling message were marked by a suffocating tension that wrapped itself tightly around Rosewood Manor. Emma moved through her world like a woman trapped in a waking nightmare, each smile forced, each word carefully measured. The secret she shared with Jack now cast a long shadow over every moment, and the cracks in a vow she had just made to Daniel began to widen with alarming speed. Daniel, too, felt the fractures spreading beneath the surface, though he tried to maintain a veneer of control. Going to work, managing clients, and fulfilling his public role as a doting soon-to-be husband, privately, he was unraveling. His nights became restless. The face of Jack haunted his thoughts, the man who had been his closest friend, now tangled in a betrayal too painful to name. On a cool autumn morning, Daniel stood outside the cafe, where he was meeting Emma for a brief breakfast before her day's work at the hospital. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and brewing coffee. Daniel's heart thumped unevenly as Emma approached, her face pale and guarded. "Morning," she said softly, her voice barely concealing the fatigue beneath. She looked around nervously before sitting across from him, their table a fragile island amidst the bustle of the city's early rush. Daniel reached out, briefly touching her hand. "We need to talk." Emma nodded, her throat tightening. "I know." The words hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. "It's the wedding vows, Emma," Daniel began, voice steady but low. "I meant what I said, forever. But forever is built on trust. And right now, I don't know if that trust is still there." Emma looked away, fighting the urge to break down. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Daniel's eyes searched hers, desperate for truth. Who is he? What did this affair mean? Her silence was answer enough. "I don't want to lose you," Daniel continued, his voice cracking. "But I can't live in lies. We need honesty, Emma." The weight of confession pressed on her, but fear kept the words bottled up. Instead, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, pain etched across his features. We're at a crossroad. Meanwhile, Jack was spiraling deeper into his own torment. Isolated from friends and family who sensed his growing distance, He found himself wandering the city streets late at night, the tangled mess of his emotions threatening to consume him. His meetings with Emma became fraught with urgency and despair, each encounter more heated and desperate than the last. One evening, after a particularly intense argument in a dimly lit cafe, Jack slammed his fist on the table. "We can't keep living this lie," he said, voice raw. "If Daniel finds out..." Emma placed a trembling hand on his arm. "He will. Soon." The pressure was unbearable, the noose tightening around their secret. Back at Rosewood Manor, subtle alliances and fractured friendships began to take shape. Some guests took Daniel's side. Others offered quiet support to Emma. The community that once celebrated the union now split into factions, each quietly choosing a side in the silent war brewing beneath the surface. Emma's mother, Claire, became a fierce protector of her daughter, while Daniel's brother Mark urged his sibling to stand firm and seek the truth no matter where it led. As the days passed, Daniel's doubts morphed into a relentless pursuit of answers. Privacy became a luxury he could no longer afford, his eyes watching every glance, every whisper, every movement. One evening, Daniel decided to confront Jack directly. They met in the park where the two had spent countless hours in their youth, now cloaked in the amber glow of streetlights. Jack's face was pale, shadows deepening around his eyes. "Daniel, I'm sorry. This whole thing, it's a mess." Daniel's voice was cold but pained. "Yeah, it is, but I need to know everything. No more lies." Jack swallowed the lump rising in his throat, reluctant but resigned to the inevitable. The truth, once unleashed, would test every bond and reveal just how fragile promises could be. The night had settled deep over Rosewood Manor, wrapping the sprawling estate in shadows and silence. Yet inside the grand house, beneath the ornate chandeliers and polished furniture, the air was thick with secrets and tension that refused to be buried. Emma sat alone in the dimly lit study, a glass of untouched wine cooling beside her on the table. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through messages on her phone, the words blurring as a heavy weight pressed on her chest. The text from earlier that day, "You can't hide forever. The truth will come out," gnawed at her relentlessly. Outside, the soft rustle of the wind moving through the old oak trees blended with the occasional distant sound of a car passing along the country road. This should have been a sanctuary, a place of refuge after days filled with escalating suspicion and heartbreak. Instead, it had become a prison of nerves and restless thoughts. Suddenly, the sound of cautious footsteps echoed from the hallway. Emma's heart leapt as Jack appeared in the doorway, his face drawn and pale under the faint glow of a wall sconce. "We need to talk," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. Emma nodded, motioning to an armchair opposite hers. The two sat facing each other, the silence stretching before Jack finally broke it. "I can't keep living like this," Jack admitted, voice low and raw. "Every moment I spend with Daniel, I feel like a fraud. And every moment with you feels like I'm tearing us all apart." Emma's gaze dropped to her hands, clenched tightly in her lap. "I don't know what to do anymore," she whispered. "The guilt is unbearable. I love Daniel, but I love you too." Jack reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "It's not just about us. There are others now. People are starting to suspect." Her breath hitched. "You think that message came from someone inside the wedding party?" Jack nodded grimly. "Someone who knows. Maybe someone who's been watching, waiting for the moment to expose us." The fear in Emma's eyes was unmistakable. What if Daniel finds out? What if everything we've built falls apart? Jack squeezed her hand. "Then we face it together. But we have to be honest. First with ourselves, then with everyone else." The room seemed to close in on them as the truth weighed heavier than ever. Emma's phone buzzed suddenly, the sharp chime breaking the fragile quiet. She glanced at the screen, heart pounding. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before opening the message. "Meet me at the old chapel. Midnight. Come alone." A shiver ran down her spine. "Who could this be?" she murmured. Jack frowned. Only one way to find out. Later that night, wrapped against the chill, Emma paced nervously near the abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town. The building was a relic from another era, its stone walls crumbling, stained glass windows shattered, and a heavy wooden door hanging slightly askew on its hinges. The moon cast a pale light over the weathered structure, making it seem even more ominous. Emma's breath came in shallow gasps as she pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The scent of dust and decay filled the air. Minutes ticked by like hours until a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp and unreadable. "I'm glad you came," the woman said, voice steady and calm. Emma's pulse quickened with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Who are you? How do you know about everything?" The woman smiled faintly. "Let's just say I have my reasons for making sure the truth doesn't remain hidden." She handed Emma a small envelope. "This contains proof. Evidence that you, Jack, Daniel, everyone should see. It's time to stop hiding." Emma's hands shook as she accepted the envelope, the reality of her predicament crashing down like a tidal wave. "Why are you doing this?" Emma asked, desperation creeping in her voice. The woman's eyes softened for just a moment. "Because secrets have a way of destroying lives. And because sometimes the only path to peace is through truth." As the woman slipped back into the darkness, Emma stood there, clutching the envelope tightly. The night seemed colder now, as if the world itself was bracing for the storm to come. Back at Rosewood Manor, Jack waited anxiously, pacing the length of the study. When Emma finally returned, her face pale but determined, he looked up immediately. "What did she say?" Jack asked. Emma held up the envelope. "Proof. Evidence. It's all here." Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Then there's no turning back." Together, they sat down to open the envelope and face the revelations that could either save them or destroy everything. The clock in Daniel and Emma's master bedroom ticked away the quiet hours after the wedding, a time that was meant to be filled with joy and new beginnings, but instead was heavy with unspoken truths. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her wedding dress folded carefully beside her. Daniel paced the room, his face pale and taut, eyes clouded with confusion and pain. The events of the previous days had chipped away at the foundation of their relationship, leaving a fragile shell that trembled under the strain. Daniel finally stopped and faced Emma, his voice low but firm. "We need to talk. Now." Emma nodded, heart pounding so loud she feared it might betray her. This moment had been building, inevitable and terrifying. "I know things have been different," Daniel began. "I've seen the distance growing between us. The secrets you and Jack have been keeping. I can't pretend anymore." Emma's breath caught. "Daniel, I never meant to hurt you. I love you." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Love isn't enough when it's built on lies. I trusted you both, and I feel like I've been living a lie." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she struggled to find the words. "There was a moment. I didn't know what I was doing. It was wrong." Daniel's jaw clenched. Wrong might be the kindest word. Emma looked down, voice barely audible. "Jack and I, we had an affair. It started months ago." The confession hung heavy in the room. Daniel's face turned ashen. "How long?" Emma swallowed hard. "Since before the engagement." A silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint sound of their breathing. Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared," Emma whispered. "I didn't want to lose you." Daniel sat down heavily on the bed. "Now, I'm not sure if I still have you, or if I ever did." Emma reached out, touching his hand. "I want to make this right. I want us to find a way back." Daniel looked at her, eyes searching. "I don't know if that's possible." As dawn approached, their conversation unfolded, raw and painful, peeling back layers of betrayal and regret. Outside, the first light of day crept through the curtains, casting pale beams over their fractured love. The wedding celebration, which had once been filled with laughter, music, and hopeful promises, now hung on the edge of disaster. The grand hall at Rosewood Manor, adorned with twinkling fairy lights and cascading flowers, seemed almost surreal against the dark undercurrents simmering beneath its festive surface. The guests, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had been mounting behind closed doors, reveled in the joy of the night. Emma had barely spoken to Daniel for days since their confession. Tensions between them had thickened the air like a suffocating fog, and the fragile truce they maintained was strained to its breaking point. Jack, once the life of every gathering, had become a ghost among the crowd, watching from the sidelines, his face a mask of guilt and sorrow. The band began to play a slow, melodic tune, inviting couples onto the dance floor. Daniel extended his hand to Emma, a silent plea for reconciliation. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though the past weeks might dissolve into the music, the weight of secrets lifting in the warmth of their shared rhythm. But beneath that fragile moment, tensions simmered dangerously. As they danced, Daniel felt the weight of Emma's gaze shift away from him repeatedly, her eyes flickering toward the edge of the room where Jack stood alone, nursing a drink, a storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. Suddenly, the music faltered, and the echo of raised voices cut through the murmur of dancing guests. A sharp crash followed. A vase shattered against the marble floor, drawing every eye. Jack stepped forward, his voice rising in heated anger. "You don't get to act like nothing's happened." Daniel's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "What are you talking about, Jack?" Emma's heart pounded as she realized the inevitable confrontation was unfolding before everyone's eyes. A small cluster of guests gathered, sensing the shift from celebration to crisis. Conversations died down, turning to whispers and glances. Jack's voice trembled with frustration and hurt. "You betrayed me, Daniel, and she lied to both of us." Daniel's eyes flashed with disbelief and betrayal. "I'm the one who's been betrayed, Jack. You crossed a line you never should have." Emma stepped between them, voice shaking but determined. "Stop. This isn't the way." But the storm had already broken loose. Jack's anger erupted in a sudden, violent shove, sending Daniel staggering backward into a nearby table. Glasses toppled, spilling red wine across the pristine white linens. Gasps and shouts erupted as the crowd scrambled to intervene. Emma screamed, trying to pull Jack back. "Please stop." Daniel recovered quickly, his face now a mask of controlled fury. He advanced on Jack, the two men locked in a fierce stare-down. Suddenly, a sharp sound, a gunshot, shattered the chaos. Time seemed to freeze. All eyes whipped toward the source of the sound. A figure crumpled to the floor, blood seeping through his shirt. It was Jack. Emma dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed against the wound, tears streaming down her face. Daniel stood frozen, shock etched deep in his features. Who did this?" someone cried. The room descended into chaos. Guests screamed and fled for the exits, some desperately trying to call for help. Emma's voice broke as she whispered, "Jack, please stay with me." Seconds felt like hours. The echo of the gunshot lingered, a brutal punctuation that shattered the fragile illusion of the perfect wedding. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Daniel sank down beside Emma, the reality of what had just happened crashing down. Their world, once filled with hope and love, was now stained with blood and betrayal. The aftermath of the shooting at Rosewood Manor sent shockwaves through the tight-knit circle of family and friends. The grand wedding celebration had turned into a nightmare, leaving everyone reeling and searching for answers amidst the chaos. In the stark fluorescent lights of the county police station, Daniel sat in a cold interview room, his hands clenched tightly on the table as detectives Harper and Mills prepared to question him. The gravity of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. The man who had planned a marriage filled with joy was now a suspect, wounded emotionally and uncertain of what awaited. "You were the last person seen with Jack Collins before he was shot," Detective Harper said, studying Daniel's face carefully. "Can you tell us what happened?" Daniel took a deep breath, voice steady but strained. "We argued. There was tension, yes, but I swear I didn't hurt him." Detective Mills interjected. "Can you explain the argument?" Daniel nodded slowly, recounting the growing rifts, the secrets, and the revelation of Jack and Emma's affair. There was anger, betrayal, but no reason for violence. Meanwhile, Emma sat in a separate room, her makeup smudged from hours of tears. She recounted the events of the night with painstaking detail, emphasizing the confusion and the sudden gunshot. The detectives noted every word, seeking inconsistencies, trying to piece together the sequence of events. Suspicion spread beyond Daniel as officers interviewed other guests. They learned about the mysterious anonymous texts Emma had received, about the whispered accusations that had fractured friendships and trust. Some mentioned an unknown figure seen lurking near the estate in the days leading up to the wedding. Claire Harper, Emma's mother, struggled to hold herself together. While supporting her daughter, she expressed doubt about Daniel's innocence. Meanwhile, Daniel's brother Mark advocated fiercely for his sibling, insisting on looking deeper into everyone's motives. As the investigation deepened, secrets long buried began to surface. The police uncovered communication between Jack and an unidentified person, threatening messages and plans to expose the affair. Who could have wanted to destroy the wedding, and why? In the middle of this turmoil, Emma's guilt intensified. She wrestled with the knowledge that her choices had set a deadly chain of events in motion. Her relationship with Daniel was fractured beyond repair, and Jack's fate hung in the balance. Interviews with friends revealed fractured alliances. Some vouched for Daniel's integrity, others hinted at hidden resentments. Rumors of old grudges and recent conflicts complicated the picture. The detectives sifted through evidence, phone records, surveillance footage, testimonies, looking for the truth beneath layers of betrayal and lies. The small community that had once gathered to celebrate a wedding was now a tangled web of suspicion and grief. Trust was a rare commodity, and everyone seemed to guard their own secrets tightly. One night, as the investigation pressed on, Emma received a visitor, a police officer with a folder of new evidence. The documents hinted at someone not previously considered, a silent observer whose motives were unclear, but whose actions had set the deadly events in motion. The question remained, who pulled the trigger on that fateful night, and why? Daniel and Emma found themselves at the center of an unraveling mystery that threatened to consume them all. The trial that followed the tragic shooting at Rosewood Manor became the focal point of the small community, drawing media attention and forcing everyone involved to confront painful truths. Courtroom seats were filled with family, friends, and neighbors, all searching for answers to the mystery that had shattered one of the most anticipated weddings of the year. Daniel sat among the witnesses, his face a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. Emma sat beside him, pale but determined to see justice done. The air was thick with tension as the prosecution laid out its case, detailing the tangled web of betrayal, secret affairs, and simmering resentments. Detective Harper took the stand, recounting the investigation that revealed not only the affair between Emma and Jack, but also uncovered the identity of the person who had fired the fatal shot. It was a name that surprised no one who had watched closely: Mark, Daniel's brother. The evidence was clear. Mark, consumed by jealousy and long-standing rivalry, had confronted Jack that night in a fit of rage. His plan had been to scare, to intimidate, but things escalated beyond his control. Mark's motive was laid bare: years of feeling overshadowed by Daniel, combined with the belief that Jack's betrayal had destroyed his brother's happiness. In his testimony, Mark expressed deep remorse, acknowledging the devastating consequences of his actions. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered the verdict: guilty of manslaughter, with a sentence that would keep Mark behind bars for years to come. Outside the courthouse, Emma and Daniel faced their fractured future. The wounds ran deep. Trust had been irrevocably broken. Emma, haunted by guilt, sought therapy and vowed to rebuild her life, learning to navigate the difficult path of forgiveness and self-discovery. Daniel, too, withdrew from his social circles, taking time to heal and reflect on the fragility of relationships. Among friends and family, the bonds that had once seemed unshakable had been tested and, in some cases, shattered. The tragic wedding that began with hope ended in heartbreak and loss, a stark reminder of the consequences when love, trust, and betrayal collide. Yet, amidst the ruins, a few tentative steps toward healing emerged. a fragile hope that someday the wounds might mend and life could begin anew.